going to start saying hello and being friendly. We're actually going to start the event.
But are we going to finish on time?
No. I have to let you know.
Janet, we've actually planned not to finish on time.
Well,
We're going all night.
that's in the tradition of Seder.
Yes.
I promise you that we'll all be able to eat the Affliction before midnight. So, Emily, how many people are we expecting? About 30?
Yeah, around 30.
Okay, so 25 when you have your normal attrition that you.
Well, I hope I didn't drop out.
Yes,
I hope so too.
So maybe everybody can say hello and tell us where you are, because we've got people from a whole range of different places. Yara, you're in my top corner. Do you want to say hello first and just introduce yourself? And
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Yara Morris. I am sitting in Perth, WA. 5 p.m. here, so I've arranged for the kids to be somewhere else, which I'm excited to be able to join you guys.
Okay, Janet.
Hi, my name's Janet. I'm coming to you from Sydney, and it stopped raining.
Where?
Great. I was starting this morning.
Oh, Wendy, you're on mute.
I'm from Sydney and I work in the New South Wales office.
Okay.
He is the mainstay, I'm telling you.
Thanks,
Wendy,
Bridget.
how many years have you worked for New South Wales, Wendy?
I'm getting old. This is 11 years now.
But that's fantastic. It's all that depth of knowledge and understanding of the organization. We can't do without you. You're
She holds up the whole edifice.
Melinda, I have to say you were fantastic for that article. When I asked you for a statement, my goodness, you had a statement. Yay. Thanks, Melinda.
And
everything.
Thank you. And there'll be in the Jewish News, there'll be an op-ed this week.
Oh, good.
So this is about, for those of you who don't know, the Women's March for Justice that was held last Monday around the country. NCJWA was one of the organizations that was a signatory to the Prime Minister as part of the major thrust of making demands that the government takes seriously the need to create Australia as a safe place for women. And we then had some marketing, I suppose, some publicity of that event on the front page of the Jewish News, both in Sydney and Melbourne, with photographs of different women marching in different places. And we're following that up this week with an op-ed in the Jewish News about the issue that I've written about dealing with violence and what we need, or some suggestions about what to do, as well as anything else. People are just going around and introducing themselves, and Peter, I think we're up to you.
Okay, I hope my internet doesn't let me down, because I've had a couple of messages that it's unstable. I'm in Jerusalem and the internet here has been amazing since the beginning of COVID. We were all, of course, convinced that it wouldn't last, and it has. And we're having a heat wave that's going to last till tomorrow, because this is spring. And the whole country's, it's election day today.
Yes.
So the whole country's in a very strange mood. We're voting, we're preparing for Pesach. We're still doing things connected with both International Women's Day 2 weeks ago and Good Girls Revolt Day, which was last week. And I don't know if any of you know about it, but I recommend you Google it, because we've been celebrating it.
What's it called?
Good Girls Revolt.
Good Girls Revolt Day, not the television series. We're not interested in that. There was a television series. We're interested in the story behind the series, the actual event.
Bernice, say hello to everybody.
Hi, I'm in Sydney, and I'm just hoping my internet holds out, because I've been warned there's going to be maintenance on the line. And if there is, I'll try and deal with it. And that's who I am.
Josh.
Hi all, I'm over in London, so thank you for being my very
What?
earliest Seder event, I think, that's scheduled. It's nice. I can hear lots of Aussie accents, and I've got to say I miss them over here. So, thanks for
And
letting me be roped in.
Joshi has played a massive, major role in compiling this Haggadah that's been a bit of a marathon effort. So I think we all should take our hats off. that we're not
Yes,
going to her.
thank you.
Emily.
Hi. Did you just want me to say where I am? Sorry,
Yes.
I was just in the middle of sending a message. I'm in Melbourne, helping Melinda with various tasks for NCJWA, which has been really enjoyable so far, very interesting.
Now, Danielle has just asked everybody if they could please download Kahoot on your phone, because we're going to be using Kahoot. So please go to your phone. And Danielle, would you like to tell anybody anything they need to know in order to do this?
So within your App Store or the Google Play Store, you should be able to find Kahoot, and we'll be doing an interactive quiz later.
Oh, I don't know if I can do that.
Anyone who can, you'll still get to have fun if you can't, but as many people that can, it will make it more engaging.
Thank you very much. And would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm here in Melbourne on the Boonwurrung land of the Kulin Nation, and I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, Dahlia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Dahlia and I'm in Sydney, so not very exciting, not very far.
But are you wet?
No, thank God. It has actually stopped raining tonight, but who knows for how long.
Welcome. Ruth.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ruth from Sydney, and this is my first Seder that is not male dominated. So I'm really excited, although I still put some lipstick on, but anyway. Habit.
That's lovely. I like it. It's nice to feel involved and engaged. So that's one way to come with smile. Alla.
Hi, I'm in Sydney, and yes, I'm glad the rain stopped a bit here as well. We've had a bit of a...
Helen Junior, I'm in a women's Seder. Are you there? Hello.
We've had some plagues leading up to Pesach here with floods and
True.
excessive amounts of spiders and mice. So I think we can tick off a few this week.
Thank you. Lauren? Oh, did you disappear? Vivian.
Good evening, everybody. We've progressed a long way from our early NCJWA Victoria Women's Seders, which were a first at the time many, many years ago. And it was a small committee, and then we all invited one friend, and we oriented it towards women. It was quite revolutionary at the time. So here we are, and I'm looking forward to the evening. Thank you very much.
Okay, Lauren, I'm going to let you be the last person to introduce yourself. I'm sorry for those other people, but I do want to start on 8 o'clock. So Lauren gets the chance to say hello.
Lauren from Melbourne, and the reason I disappeared was I wanted to show you 2002 was the first National Council Women's Seder that I attended.
Fantastic. Oh, we must ask people to bring copies of whatever they've got for the archive, and so we can keep records. So Calantha, Carol, Deborah, Sandra, Renee, Eliza, Kerry, Sylvia, I'm sorry you haven't had a chance to say hello, but you will get a chance to get to know the other people who are here tonight. But as I said, I want to start, as it's now 8 o'clock, because as a Seder, we're guaranteed to go over time. And in fact, it's physically impossible to do a Seder in the sort of amount of time that we think that we'd like to do a Seder. And so I do have to apologize in advance that when we've done our timing, it is hopefully not too far over, but it will definitely go over the original plan. Let me begin by acknowledging the people of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. The land where I live, which they claim is actually disputed amongst Indigenous people. There is some debate about whether the Boonwurrung people are actually the rightful owners of the land. But I'm convinced by all the bits of information we have around Elsternwick about this. It's very important that we acknowledge the traditional owners. In a traditional culture, in a lot of Indigenous cultures, the land and the relationship with the land is sacred. And we're living, of course, and we get the benefit of living in this magnificent land of ours, Australia. But also, when you acknowledge country, my Indigenous friends have told me that it's a very important statement, because you are saying that you've come to the meeting at this place with purpose. You haven't just come randomly to a place. You've acknowledged that you're here, and you're here for a reason. And I want to pay my respects to the elders past and present of the Indigenous people throughout Australia, wherever they may be, and wherever you may be, and on whatever lands we're meeting. But I want to talk about the purpose of a Seder and say how this ties in so nicely. So the first thing is, I'm going to go to some of the quotes that are on page 4. And I should say to you, we're not going to do everything that's in this Haggadah. If we were, we would be here till tomorrow. We've given you a lot of material for you to use at your own Seders and to be further reading. And sometimes I'm going to say, well, the next thing is on such and such a topic, and to read through. But every so often I'll be bringing you to a page. It doesn't matter if you don't get to that page, because there'll always be an announcement as well. But if you like to follow on pages, there are some quotes on page 4 that I'd just like to begin with. That we're not merely telling a story here. We're being called to a radical act of empathy. So this story that we're telling tonight, that we're going to tell, the story of our people, is not just a story. You may tell a tale that takes up residence in someone's soul, becomes their blood and self and purpose. That tale will move them and drive them, and who knows what they might do because of it, because of your words. That is your role, your gift. Remember this day on which you were free from Egypt, the house of slavery, how the Lord freed you from it with a mighty hand. And you shall explain to your child on this day, it's because of what the Lord did for me when I went free from Egypt. And in every generation, every person must consider themselves as if they personally went out of Egypt. A Seder is a time when we're going to tell our story, and we're coming together as women to tell our story. And there is a history, and NCJW has been part of that history. But with any Jewish gathering, we like to sanctify time, to contain the activity in which we're engaged. So I'm going to hand it over to Yara so we can light candles as we do at the beginning of such events.
Thanks, Melinda. I'm going to first read out a bit of a background, and then I'll light the candles. So may the light of the candles we kindle together tonight bring radiance to all who still live in darkness. May this season, marking the deliverance of our people from Pharaoh, rouse us against anyone who keeps others in servitude. In gratitude for the freedom we enjoy, may we strive to bring about our own liberation and the liberation of all people everywhere. Lighting these candles, we create the sacred space of the Festival of Freedom. We sanctify the coming together of our community. And now I'm going to light the candles. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu. Sorry, 1 second. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'adlik ner shel Yom Tov. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekiyanu v'kiyanu v'eganu lazman hazeh. Amen.
Amen. So this is one of the very few prayers we're actually going to say tonight. That was so beautiful, Yara, and you look so gorgeous. That wasn't, everyone will agree that that's what a beautiful aesthetic start to the evening. We've got a sacred time and a sacred place. We're not going to say very many prayers. We're not going to eat very much food, and we're actually not going to sing very many songs, because to do that would take up quite a lot of time, and singing doesn't work very well on Zoom, is my experience. But we are, I hope, going to have lots of fun and a lot of interaction. The first thing we normally do is sing a song, which is the list of the order of the things in the Seder. You'll find that list on page 8. The list is Kadesh or Chatz. And it's a song that we sing that goes through the order of the Seder. And that's because a Seder is the order of things to do. And I think we can think about a Seder as a structured conversation, a conversation around a series of topics that seem quite artificial in some ways, but as a whole, they hang together. What we're doing is we're telling our multi-layered, complex history. So this is the history that we have as Jews from the beginning and the birth of the Jewish people as a nation. We're going to be telling stories that come all through history to more recent times. We're going to talk about personal stories to freedom. We're going to talk about what it means to be a woman in these stories, what it means to be a woman in history. And we're going to do this at the same time as thinking about celebrating freedom, but at the same time taking a somber look at slavery and oppression, which is quite a big ask. Now, what we would be doing next if we were at home is pouring some wine and drinking some wine. We're not going to do that now, but if you have a look on page 8, you'll see that we have 4 cups of wine are normally drunk through the Kiddush, through the Seder. And there are lots of different explanations about why there should be 4 cups of wine. One explanation is that it represents the 4 mothers, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And this raises a really interesting question. How can we have 4 mothers? Because if you think about it, Jacob actually had 6 women who gave birth to the nations, to the tribes of Israel. What happened to Bilhah and Zilpah? They were handmaidens, slaves. Their children were Naphtali and Dan, and Asher and Gad. Some of us are descended from those tribes, possibly, who knows? But they were all part of Israel, but the women didn't count. So one way of rectifying that is to say, well, we have 4 glasses of wine that we drink, but we actually have 2 more glasses of wine. One of them, or two more glasses on the table. One is Miriam's cup that we'll talk more about, and another is Elijah's cup. So perhaps that's one of the things we can think about when we think about the number of 4 cups of wine. In the materials I've given you, the Haggadah, there are some other explanations of 4 cups of wine. And one very nice one, I think, is to look at the history of feminism in 4 cups. And I think that looking at different ideas about how we can look at these as historical statements to come towards the liberation of women, because obviously we're a long way from being liberated. Women, all of the things we know about sexual violence, all the things we know about inequality, all the things we know about sexual harassment, all the things we know about gender pay gap, all show us that we're a long way from being liberated. Because in almost all cases, the only explanation for this is that we have female bodies. There's no other good explanation for why it is that 2 years after graduating from law school, boys and girls earn a different amount of money. They can't be doing different jobs. They're doing the same job. So look at that history of feminism and just realize that throughout the Seder, there are so many places where we can talk about women's roles and so many places to do that. Rather than try and do everything and hurrying through, I'm just going to make these sorts of references and say, read further up on this particular one. So after we've drunk our first cup of wine, the second thing that happens is that we have what's called urchatz, where we wash our hands. Now, normally when you wash hands, you say a bracha. But on this occasion, you don't say a bracha. And there are some interesting questions about why not. One answer is that the normally time when you do things, it's sacred. But when you just come together, you know, we now all use hand sanitizer everywhere we go, that this washing is just like that, one, to make social intercourse possible, to make it possible to be as part of a community. But tonight we're going to think about the water that you use to wash your hands at urchatz and see how water is very often associated with the character of Miriam, who is a key player in our story tonight. And so we're going to talk at this point about Miriam. Janet.
Miriam's importance in the Exodus story lies with us filling the fourth cup with water. And there are many references to water in the Exodus story. According to the Midrash, whenever Miriam wandered in the wilderness, springs of water would rise from the ground, feeding the people and sustaining them so that they could come to a new land. Placing Miriam's cup of water alongside Elijah suggests that Miriam should be given equal importance to Elijah, because even though wine is important, water is vital for our survival. And remember, because of water, the Nile delivered Moses through the bulrushes to Pharaoh's daughter. I was also inspired by lovely lines from Miriam's song, that she was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one which sang our history, and every thread and every strand she weaved with delight. So Miriam wove together the tapestry of the Jewish people from different threads, and she did it creatively and she did it with effort, but effort that she enjoyed doing. And so I was inspired by this, that as women, we too can create our own harmony, our own tapestry, which combines and consists of the many facets, the many different people that we are. And yet we are all Jewish, and we can all come together as one. So from Miriam, there are many lessons that we can learn and we can think about. And some of these may resonate with you as well. But for me, I'll just talk about a few. That Miriam had courage. She spoke up when the baby Moses was delivered to Pharaoh's daughter and said, "Have I got a midwife for you?" And she was also, I think, sensitive that the Israelites were frightened when they went through the Red Sea and they had seen all these miracles from God. And so to appease them and to make them happy, she burst into song, she took her tambourine, and she encouraged others also to look at the miracles of God as wonders, not to be frightened of. Miriam also spoke against or spoke badly about Moses' wife. And because of the criticism, she was struck down with leprosy. So perhaps if we feel that that we want to say something bad about people, we should shut our mouths, particularly when it comes to family. So that is also something that perhaps we can be inspired. So I've left the others in the Haggadah for you to think about and for you to be inspired of as well. But I was particularly moved by the image of the tapestry in Miriam's song.
Thank you so much. And in the traditional way of the Seder, we get bits and pieces of the story, and it won't be until the end of this evening that this tapestry will all be spun in such a way that you can see where all the different bits are fitting together. So we move from Orchatz to Yachatz. We take a piece of matzah. Now, in my family, we don't keep matzah anywhere until Pesach, and we don't. I don't actually have any even in the house to lift up for you. So you're going to have to imagine a piece of matzah, and we say something very important. We say, "This is the bread of affliction, the poor bread, which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in want share the hope of Passover. As we celebrate here, we join with our people everywhere. This year we celebrate here, next year in the land of Israel. Now we are still in bonds. Next year may we be free." Now we can focus on any bit of that, but I think it's important that we are focusing on the fact that we have bread. All of us have access to food who are here tonight, but there are some members of the Jewish community who don't have access to enough food. And it's our responsibility to invite those people to our homes, to make sure that everybody can come and join us, to make sure that everyone has a Seder to participate in. Because this is a festival where we've got lots of moral instruction, if you like, lots of things to think about. What does it mean that there is a bread for a poor man bread? And there are so many different ways we can think about affliction, about oppression, but there are also ways to think about freedom and what it means to be a woman in the context of freedom. And I'm going to hand you over to Shosh.
Hi.
To explore this.
My mother's stolen a bit of my spiel, which is both lovely and going to provide a little bit more time for us to talk amongst ourselves. So Emily, I hope you've prepared the breakout rooms. Just give me a thumbs up if that is the case. What we're going to do now is I'm going to ask you to open the handout that I sent through. I'm going to share my screen for a second just so that you can all see it. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take a second to discuss what it is that is freedom and that key question when it comes to a Seder. So this is a quote by Shannon Alder, and I find it really interesting. "Every woman that has finally figured out her worth has picked up her suitcase of pride and boarded a flight to freedom, which landed in the Valley of Change." And so I was hoping that everyone will have a copy of this in your emails. I don't know for sure that everyone has it. Does everyone have it? Can I get a thumbs up from the crowd? Because it's a bit weird to just watch all these little boxes on the side. Give me a thumbs up if you have it. Otherwise, I'll send it through again. Oh, Wendy's giving me a thumbs up. So I just want to ask, in your breakout room, discuss for you what that freedom might have been. Is there a story where you discovered what freedom could be, or your journey to discover that? There's always going to be different interpretations. And so just give each member of your breakout room a minute to discuss. And once that's over, Emily's going to send you a message to say halfway done, and we're going to jump into the Manish Tana discussion. And the thing about Manish Tana is that it's a question of why tonight and why this experience. And And the questions that are asked for Manishtan are actually different in Talmud from the ones that we ask traditionally at our Seder, because the ones that were written in the original text require that sacrifice in a temple exist. And so once again, I want to contextualize. I want to ask, why tonight for us is this a different experience? Why is it different to have a women's Seder? Why is it that we haven't had the experience of necessarily having a women's Seder, or a Seder where women's voices are truly valued? So I'm going to ask you to brainstorm in your groups some of those pieces as a conversation. So these are just 2 little exercises. I'm really curious at the end to hear things, but I don't know if we're going to have time to report back to the group. So Emily, I'm going to ask you to send people off to their breakout rooms and discuss this.
maybe while we're waiting for everybody else, if anyone wants to put anything that they heard that they can add or change in their Seder into the chat. I just heard the idea of having peppercorns on the table to represent lice from the plagues, which I thought was such a nice, unfussy thing to do. So while we're waiting for, Melinda's back, but if anyone wants to put any new ideas that came up in their discussion, please feel free.
Hey, everybody.
What are you suggesting? You putting them putting ideas into the chat, Danielle?
Yeah, if you learnt anything new that you might want to do differently at your Seder from the discussion. I love hearing about people giving different giving parts out to different people, or using peppercorns as lice, or to represent the 10 plagues, or one of the 10 plagues. So if anyone heard something new that maybe somebody else might want to incorporate in their Seder, feel free to put it in the chat.
Great thinking. Well, Shosh, do you want to just do a recap there?
I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for being so open and joining in. I'm sorry that everyone sort of got into a flow of talking and we don't have enough time that we can continue those conversations in depth. But I do hope that we continue having them throughout the rest of at least this festival, if not throughout the year, of sort of deciding what we want to define as that sense of freedom and what we want in our spaces, so that we truly can engage in the world. So as Danielle said, please add any new inspiration throughout tonight's event.
So one of the things that's different in a women's Seder is there's a level of equality that we've noticed, that the women here aren't all going out and doing the cooking and missing half the Seder while they're getting the food ready for everybody else. So at least in that regard, there's a difference. There's all sorts of interesting ideas that are coming up, and I'm hoping that you're going to go to your Seders when it actually gets to formal Seder night and bring some of these ideas into your household. And it's going to be a challenge because, you know, in my household, we run a very mad and egalitarian Seder, but there's always still these questions about where the space for the men, where the space for the women, how you make it equal for everybody to have a voice. And sometimes that's to do with content. That's sometimes to do with process. You know, sometimes the men have got a particular way that they've done it, and it may not be a male thing. It might just be that they're stuck in the traditional way of doing things, and we're coming in and breaking tradition. We're saying, hey, hold on, maybe the 4 questions mean something different. Maybe there are different questions we should be asking. So at this point of the Seder, we've got to the point where we've asked the question about why this night is different, and then we give a really simple answer. The reason it's different is because we were slaves in Egypt and now we're free. Avadim hayinu. Now we're free. And if we were going to be singing, we would be singing to our freedom. And then we'd be going on, not to the story of our freedom, which any logical, organized religion would do, but we're going to step back and ask questions about process. See, we still haven't got to the story because we've got so many preliminary things we have to discuss. And there's a section in the Haggadah that's called the 4 sons. And the 4 sons is about the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the child who doesn't know how to ask. Now, some people would see that literally as about sons. And so one answer, and in our Haggadah, we've got text of 4 daughters. Okay, so we can change the daughters. We can also change what constitutes wisdom and what constitutes simplicity. One idea I heard this year, sorry, before I get to that, another thing that people talk about is these 4 sons or 4 daughters actually representing generations of relationship with Judaism. They also talk about the 4 children as actually different styles of learners. And that the reason that this is here is because this Seder, and a Seder is, we were told at the beginning that we have to teach our children. The Seder is partly for the children, so that the children will learn, and that they need to learn in all the different ways to meet all the different learning needs of all the children. But it's also partly so we will teach. And we have to teach in all the different ways we can think of to teach the story. One idea I came across in doing the research for this Seder was that there's another thing that children sometimes do that adults don't tend to do, and that is that children tend to call out the truth. And you know the story of the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
The child will say, the emperor does not have any clothes on. There are lots of things that happen around us where we are just so bought into the procedure that we'll think something is so self-evident, and anyone with completely fresh eyes will actually say, hold on, why are you saying that's a horse? It's clearly a cow. Okay, so children sometimes bring with them truth. And so maybe in a Women's Seder, we can look at all these different alternative ideas about how to go about processing the information, and also what it means to have daughters engaged instead of sons, whether daughters have different learning styles than sons do, whether there are needs that are not being met if we just generalize that this group of four universal people. But we're going to have thought in different ways of teaching. And the very important thing that is that during the rest of the Seder, that we recognize all these different teaching styles and that there are all sorts of different people in the room. So now we're going to move from a discussion to something slightly different, a different way of interacting. So over to Danielle.
Thank you very much. You will now see on your screen, hopefully, a purple screen that says Kahoot. And you can see that I've signed in. And hopefully, those of you who managed to download the app, or you can go to kahoot.it, and it will ask you to put a game pin in, which is this game pin at the top, 6721032. And we're going to play a little game. One of the things that is important about the Seder is that you engage everybody from the youngest to the oldest. Oh, I've got Shoshana is logged in and ready to play. And one of the things that you learn about if you go to a Jewish school or you go to an after-school Jewish program is you learn about the Seder plate. But then as adults, other than the hurry of, oh my God, I forgot to not shell one of the eggs so that I can put an egg on the Seder plate, you forget about it almost. You don't talk about it. I know when we get to Rabban Gamliel, we talk about the matzah and the maror and the Pesach, but what about those other things on the Seder plate? So today we're going to play a game and go through what's on our Seder table as we get ready and see what's the point of any of them. We've got 8 people signed up now. We'll give it a few more minutes because there are 27 of us online. When we hit about hopefully 20, we'll start playing. You can play along even if you don't have the app or you can't go to the website.
Yeah.
Somebody has put something in the chat. Oh, it's my sister saying a nice comment, which is very nice. We've got 12 people. So this is the chance for us to think about why we put things on the table and what ways we might discuss them. And one of the really interesting things, if you actually do this as your table, is sometimes somebody comes up with an idea that you've never heard of before. And one of the things I love in our particular Seders is we all use different Haggadot. And one of the things that means is that you've got different people's interpretations of the same thing. Oh, we've lost somebody. We're at 9 and now we're back. Then we went to 10 and then we went back. Excellent. Thank you, Carol, for signing in, and Karen. And there is no real right or wrong reason, because if you can think of a logical reason why something is on the table and it's made you think about something, then it's served its purpose. All right, I'm going to wait for 1 more minute and then we will get started. So I think there are 12 questions on our game today. And It's all about having fun. It's as I said, it's about thinking about things in a different way. All right, I'm going to press start and we'll get playing. Here we go. The questions should appear on your screen as well, but I'll read them out as we go along. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is parsley or carapace. And what is the reason for the carapace? Was it food found in the desert to sustain the Jewish people? Does it represent that it's spring in the Northern Hemisphere? Does it represent the brush used to paint the blood on the doorpost before the Jews left Israel? Or does it represent the joy of childbirth? Or we only had we had 5 answers and 3 people got it correct. So you've only got 20 seconds to answer the question. So 2 of these 4 reasons. So as I said, if you could connect with something, you could say any of the reasons might be correct, except I'm not sure parsley would grow in the desert. And I'm also not sure how sustained you'd feel if that was all you were provided to eat. But it does. It represents that it's spring in the Northern Hemisphere, but also the brush used to paint the blood on the doorpost before the angel of death went flying over and killed the firstborn. So Lauren and Karen are in the lead. So please try and answer as quickly as you can. Once again, multiple answers. Charoset. What is charoset? It's a treat bought for women after childbirth. Is it something sweet to balance out the bitterness of the maror? Is it representative of the nuts and apples collected by women in the forest? Or is it symbolic of the mortar used by the Jewish slaves to build the pyramids? All right, yay! We had way more answers and we had lots of people that were had the correct answer. What else do we have on our... Oh, Calantha's in the lead now, and then followed by Melinda and Shoshana. Here's our next question. There are 11 questions in this quiz. The egg or the beitzah that I mentioned before about burning. Is it a protein to sustain us through a long night? Our Seders often go for 6 or 7 hours. Is it related to Easter eggs? Does it symbolize the second sacrifice offered on Pesach? Or is it a fertility symbol? Once again, multiple answers could be correct. Excellent. So we had 9 people that says it symbolizes the second sacrifice offered on Pesach. Does anyone want to unmute themselves and tell me what the first sacrifice is? Anyone know?
The Korban Pesach. The
Korban Pesach. Yes. And it's also, the Beitzah is also a fertility symbol, and it's a sign of new life, and that's what the Jewish people got when they left Israel. When they left Egypt.
Can I argue about Easter eggs?
No, you can save it for later because we'll run out of time. So Shoshana's in the lead, taking over, but Karen's got on a streak. So let's go into the 4th question. Once again, so we're now up to the lamb shank, to the zaroa. You got a bit of information about it before. Is it the offering in the temple? Is it symbolic of the lamb sacrifice prior to leaving Egypt? Is it the fact that Jews are carnivorous? Or does it represent the destruction of an Egyptian god? 10 answers, excellent. Oh, so it was 3 of these answers could be considered correct. So it's the first offering, it's the offering in the temple. It's representative of the destruction of an Egyptian god. And as most of you got, it's symbolic of the lamb sacrifice prior to leaving Egypt. Melinda swept up, but Karen's still on a streak. She's got 4 in a row. Question 5. Miriam's cup. So we've heard a little bit about Miriam's cup already. Kos Miriam, does it represent the world that Miriam carried in the desert, sustaining life? Is it to offer a balance to Elijah's cup? Is it to put women front and center of the Seder? Or is it to add another thing to knock over on the Seder table?
It's definitely that one.
So excellent. We had 8 people said that it's the well that Miriam carried in the desert, sustaining life. Without the access to clean, pure water, the Jews would not have made it through the desert. We would not all still be here. And also an answer is that it's to put women front and center of the Seder, because there aren't women mentioned in the Haggadah. So we have to make sure that we are all heard of. All right. 3 players have got 4 in a row. Shoshana's still in the lead.
It's orange.
Yeah, nepotism. Is the orange to offer a sugar boost so we can complete our long night of the Seder? Is it to represent there are many segments of the Jewish community? Is it to provide us with sweetness? Or is it to represent the heat of the desert and the plants growing in Israel? Wow, we have lots of people who know that to represent that there are many segments of the Jewish community. And it's really important that when we talk about including women, we don't just talk about including women. We talk about including people of different ages, of different abilities and disabilities, that we talk about including Black Jews or Asian Jews or Reform Jews and Conservative Jews and Orthodox Jews, that we want to make sure that everyone as much as possible can be included in the Seder. Well done. Oh, Karpas is coming up. I wonder who Karpas is. Question 7, a potato peel. So is the potato peel to remind us in the eyes of many that Jews are the dregs of society? Is it to remind us of starvation during the Shoah? Is it an alternative to maror in cold climates? Or is it to remind us that this is the main form of carb to be eaten during Pesach? Enough of all that matzah. Really what you need is potatoes. And the correct answer is to remind us of starvation during the Shoah. It's not possible to talk about redemption and coming forth without, in this day and age, talking about the Shoah and talking about how the Jewish people have come through and have continued to thrive. But we also have to remember how hard it was during the time. And this is a moment for us to stop and really, you know, they say that all of us were there at the receiving of the Torah, that every Jew was there. But to a certain extent, we need to imagine that every Jew was in the Shoah and recognize how lucky we are to be free and to be able to practice Judaism the way we each choose to in this day and age. Oh, Viv is coming up. And Karen is still on a streak, 7 in a row. Question 8. What else is on our table? The matzah. This is not the main carb, potato main carb. Does it correspond to 3 parts of our intelligence, conception, analysis, and knowledge? Is it the bread of affliction? Does it represent the 3 types of Jews, the Kohen, Levi, and Bnei Israel? And does it represent the suffering of the Jewish people in Israel?
Danielle, you got to get your Israel and Egypt right. You're a little muddled tonight.
I'm very geographically challenged. So to me, they're all places a long, long way away and places that we in Australia are locked out of heading to. So this actually, the one in red about corresponding to the 3 parts of intelligence was not something that I'd particularly heard about before. And today I went into our box of Haggadot and found discovering order in the Seder. And one of the things is we have no order in our Seder because my family is all a bit mixed up. But this book happens to have a particularly Chabad perspective, and it talks about the matzah representing the head of the body, and that there are 3 intellectual components that make up the word Chabad. So Chochmah, which is wisdom, or conception, bina, which is understanding or analysis, and da'at, which is knowledge or integration. And I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about the matzah as being the way we contribute to our Seder, and that we can't just take it at face value. We have to analyze it, and we have to add our knowledge to what is happening. Oh, Melinda is creeping up, but Shush is still up there. She's fast on her keyboard. I think she has the benefit of age.
Stay out of my spot.
Now we're going to have a generational battle. Question 9. Salt water. Salt water. Is it to represent the water as the wellspring of life? Does it represent Miriam? Does it represent the water at the Red Sea? Or does it represent the tears of the slaves?
Tears.
Excellent. So everybody said that it represented the tears of the slave, but it can also represent the water at the Red Sea. It doesn't represent Miriam, because Miriam gave us fresh water. If all we had to drink was salt water, we'd get dehydrated very, very quickly. And so the Red Sea happens to be very salty as well. All creeping up, creeping up. Carapace is in 5th place. Viv Seder, you've got 2 more questions to go, people, to make it on top of the leaderboard. Here we go. The bitter herb, the maror. Is it because horseradish is a very good digestive to counter the matzah? Is it to remind us the bitterness of being slaves? Is it to make us cry because we're oppressed? Or is it to make us cry at the Seder in response to all the dad jokes that are told? And let me tell you, not only do dads naturally tell you dad jokes at the Seder because they think they've got a captive audience, but throughout the Haggadah there are dad jokes that just naturally fall in there. And yes, everybody said to remind us of the bitterness of being slaves, but it's also to make us cry and to really feel the impact of being oppressed. Without actually oppressing us, other than making us sit at the table with our brother and our sister for hour upon hour. And the last thing on our Seder plate we're about to get to, I don't think anyone's going to take over from Shoshana, but it's very close between the next 3. Let's see how we go. The final item on our Seder table is Elijah's cup. We've talked about Miriam's cup. Is it an extra cup in case of last minute guests? Is it to trick the children into believing a visitor comes when we open the door? Is it to represent the coming of Moshiach, or to represent a positive future? And once again, I think you could probably argue that it might fit any of these, but we've definitely got the representation of the coming of Moshiach, and that knowing that we are moving into the next world. We definitely trick the children into believing a visitor comes when we open the door. In my family, it's also we send whoever's about to fall asleep at the table to go and open the door, because then they get that cold waft and it wakes them up and revives them a bit more to continue the Seder. So that is what was on our Seder plate. Congratulations to Carapace. Congratulations to Melinda, and well done to Shoshana, who beat...
I definitely feel like I cheated here. Danielle, did you give me all the answers beforehand?
I didn't, but we've been to the same Seders. So hopefully that means you've been listening. For all these years. It's very hard to tell, with younger sisters, whether they're actually paying attention. Thank you very much for indulging me in this game. I hope you've learned some things about what might be on your Seder table, and that it will make you think about what is going to and get people's attention and capture their imagination as we go through the evening. And I'll hand back to Melinda.
Well, thank you so very much, Danielle. You'll have noticed this is a family affair because Seders are family affairs. So you've heard from two of my daughters, and now you're going to hear from my sister, Peter, who's in Israel. And Peter and I work together on very many projects. And you've also heard from Janet, who's part of my NCJWA family, and from Yara, who's part of my NCJWA family, and we'll hear other NCJWA people as we progress. So Peter is going to now take us to the story, what it's all meant to be about. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask whoever's moderating that we go on to gallery view so that everybody has a square and an equal size. Take me out of the center, please. Can that be done? And the reason that we're going to do this is I would like to engage everybody in what we call bibliodrama. Now, the word biblio doesn't, in this case, necessarily mean Bible. It means book or literature or text. But of course, when we practice bibliodrama, when I practice it, I'm dealing with biblical and sacred texts. I'm still not seeing everyone in gallery view. Is that my issue? Can I fix it? I need to fix
that's for you.
Lovely.
So
Okay.
anyone having
Much
trouble, jump up to the top right-hand side of your screen, and there's a little button called View. If you click on it, what you want to do is select Gallery View.
And I'm also going to ask those who can turn on cameras to do so, because I won't be able to call on you if I can't see that you're indicating you want to respond. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go through the story, just some of it, not all of it. And I'm going to ask you to respond. And there are two rules of bibliodrama. The first rule is you only respond in the first person, in the character to whom the question is directed. So if I say children of Israel, Maxine, you don't say, well, I think the children of Israel would feel. You say, I, as a child of Israel, feels. And if I address you as Miriam, you don't say I, Lauren, you say I, Miriam. Speak in the voice of the character to whom the question is addressed. That's rule one. And rule two is you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. So this is how we're going to go. So I just want to remind you that our Haggadah begins, or the story begins, where Jacob goes down to Egypt with his 70 descendants. If you read from Bereshit in Genesis, when we're told the story, it says, and these are the names of the children of Israel who came into Egypt. Jacob is his sons, and it goes through and you can count 66 names in that list. 2 of them are women. The other 4, there's some discussion about whom they might represent. It could be Jacob, Leah, Joseph, his 2 sons. There's some discussion about who are the 4 missing names, but I will emphasize again, only 2 women are listed in the name. And it makes me ask the question, women, ladies, women daughters, women wives, women mothers, when Jacob said the family is moving to Egypt, did you go voluntarily? Did you go enthusiastically? What was your response when Jacob said to the family, we're going down to Egypt because my son Joseph has invited us to overcome the famine there in Egypt. In Egypt, we can overcome the famine because Joseph is in charge. And Jacob says, children of Israel, we're moving. He doesn't ask you. He doesn't turn to you. Women of Israel, what was your thinking? What do you feel about being asked to go to Egypt? And please just indicate with your hand or unmute yourself if you'd like to respond. Women of Israel, what's your response? Shoshi, you'll need to unmute.
Let me know if I'm doing this right. I, as a woman of Israel, think that this is an awful lot of packing. that has to happen, and huge amounts of logistics, and everyone's going to whine the entire way, and I don't have enough snacks. And I think that logistically, I'm a little overwhelmed.
So this woman of Israel is overwhelmed and concerned about the details of getting there. Other women of Israel, what's going on in your mind when you're told you have to go down to Egypt?
Well, I suppose you know best.
You're talking to Jacob, and you're
Yes.
saying to Jacob, I suppose
you know best. It doesn't seem like a good idea on the face of it, but you must have a good reason.
Thank you. This woman of Israel is skeptical about whether this is a good idea at all, but nevertheless, she's going. Yes, Kalantha.
This woman of Israel, where are we? Egypt.
No, you're in Israel.
Okay, this woman of Israel is questioning why we have to go.
So you're asking Jacob, why do we have to go? Why? Because he doesn't actually address you. He doesn't address the women of Israel. Thank you. Why? Ruth.
That sounds like an exciting adventure.
Aha.
So my mother-in-law.
So we have women of Israel who are reluctant, women of Israel who are resistant, women of Israel who are excited by the prospect, and women of Israel who just take the burden of the family on their shoulders. And we go down to Egypt, we women who have not been named, who've not been asked, who've not been mentioned, and we take up our lives in Goshen. And then after a few generations, the slavery begins. And the Haggadah tells us, and we were oppressed. Women of Israel, share with me your first sense of the oppression. What was happening to you and your family, and what was happening particularly to you as a woman when the oppression begins?
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, and you're speaking as a woman of Israel.
Pardon? Is that her?
Yes, that's the woman that was talking.
Okay.
Earlier.
Enjoy your talk.
I am.
Thank
I don't
you.
want to show me.
Why not?
No, I don't want people. It's everybody.
Okay, so what is happening, women of Israel?
Yeah, you can speak to her now.
Yes. Share as a woman of Israel, what's happening to you when the slavery begins?
I don't have enough food. I just don't seem to be able to get enough food to feed my family, you know. We came here because there was meant to be lots of food. And now suddenly everybody seems to be working harder, but there's just not enough food around.
Thank you. So your first experience is as the mother of the household, wanting to feed your family, and there's just not enough food. Janet.
I have to work from sun up to sundown for no pay and no appreciation. And if I die on the job, I am just thrown away like a piece of garbage.
So as a woman, you're working from morning to night and not feeling the reward and feeling as if your life doesn't matter. The experience of slavery, other women, when it first begins, perhaps I can ask you, women of Israel, do you have a discussion with the men in your household, with your husbands? Ruth, you wanted to share about your experience.
Yeah, I'm asking my God, who made us the chosen people, why we have to suffer like this. Why does God's chosen people have to suffer like this? What have we done?
You turn to God. So your response is to turn to God. Do all the women of Israel turn to God? Do you? I asked a moment ago also to share. Do you have any discussions in your household? What do you talk about with the men in your household? What do you tell your children as you go through slavery?
I tell my husband and my children that if you speak up, you will be killed. So shut your mouth and you have no rights. Yeah.
Thank you. Jerry. Jerry, you're muted.
I would like to think that despite the hardship, I might somehow find some degree of hope and positivity for the future, because every day is so hard. Every day is so hard and harrowing, and I would want to just gather some hope and try and offer that to my children.
Thank you, Jerry. So this woman of Israel is offering hope. And I just want to ask you, women of Israel, are you the person in the household who is providing the hope? Because I heard one voice, one woman who said that she's warned her family, just be quiet, be compliant, and don't put yourself in greater risk. And here we hear a voice that might be saying to the family, have hope, it's going to be better. What messages, what are you saying, women of Israel, to your family? What is your response to this slavery?
Our men have deceived us.
Our men have deceived us. So this is causing in your household some dissent.
Yes.
Because the decision to go down to Egypt was made by the patriarch of the family and his sons and grandsons.
Right.
And now this has been, all this hope has been dashed. So in this family, it's causing dissent and disharmony, the oppression. Any other voices, women of Israel? What are you saying? Yes, Melinda.
In my household, we're coming closer together. We're scared about what's going on outside, but we still have young children and we're still going to grow our family. We're not going to stop. We're not going to let all of this stop us, producing more members of our tribe. We think if there are more of us, it might help.
So this woman of Israel is the backbone, is the strength, and the family has been drawn closer together by the experience of slavery. Any other voices, women of Israel? What are you saying and what is your experience? Maxine?
In our house, we're drawing together as a community and drawing strength from each other. So families are gathering together and we're finding out what the resources, how they're coping and how best we can come together and be close as a community.
So here's another woman of Israel for whom the experience of slavery has brought the family closer. Can I just ask you, Maxine, in your family, who's got the most hope? Who's got their act together? Is it you as a woman of Israel? Is there someone else in your family who?
My mother-in-law who's right here.
Very good. Your mother-in-law is the backbone, keeping the family together. That's fantastic. Janet.
In our family where we were working from morning to night, and we had no rights, we are so tired and so exhausted that we feel like giving up. But in our hearts, we are praying for salvation, for God to listen to us and to help us.
I just want to hear, thank you so much. So that despite the exhaustion, you've just got that spark of hope.
Yeah.
That's there. I just wondered whether there's any family here, any woman of Israel who has really given up. Is there such a woman of Israel here for whom the slavery has really taken your will away? I'd be very interested to hear if that voice is here. Kalantha, you wanted to say something different, perhaps?
Yeah, I think my family is inspired by Maxine's family, and I'm thinking that we should get together and hatch a plan to get out of this mess.
Well, the brave women of Israel, in fact, are the backbone of the community. Our story tells us that it is two women who begin the revolt, but before them, and I'll come back to these two particular women, I want to remind you, as Melinda indicated a little earlier, that the women used to go out into the apple orchards, and the women used to entice their husbands. There are two midrashim that I want to bring to your attention. One of them was that they used to boil 2 pots of water. One of them was water for drinking and washing to remain as water. And the other one was to boil the fish that the women would go out and catch. Because as somebody said, I don't remember which of the women, I think Janet said that you didn't have enough to eat, you were hungry. And some of you have mentioned that the women used to find a way of catching fish and boil them in the jars, and then they would feed their husbands well despite the slave rations, and then they would seduce their husbands. They would become pregnant with multiple births, and they would have to, and this women I want to speak to you about for one moment, they would have to abandon those children that they gave birth to in the orchards and rely on nature to allow those children to survive, because as slaves, they couldn't return with their children. So I want to ask whether there is any woman that I'm speaking to now amongst the women of Israel who had the experience of having to leave a child behind and what that meant to you. Is there a woman here who had that experience? What did it mean to you? Do you know of a woman who had to leave a child behind? Shoshi?
I think it broke the family to a large degree. I think whether they're my children or a niece or nephew, I think that it's sort of like leaving a significant part of your hope on the other side of the house, of the village, of the wall of safety, in sort of this sense of unknowns. It really is a very large unknown that seeps into everything else that you do.
Because I want to remind you that this slavery goes on for 210 years, for generation after generation. And these children, somehow who were left behind, made their way back to their families when they were old enough to deceive the Egyptians and not be seen as new children, as new babies. And they survived somehow. But the thought of not being able to raise your own children, which was part of the experience of slavery, I think we realized how hard it has been. And then there were two, Pharaoh was unhappy because despite his imposition of slavery, the Jewish people were continuing to grow. He didn't know about these women giving birth, we women giving birth, and we just continue to grow. So he decides, I'm going to have to kill the children. And two brave women, the midwives, are summoned by Pharaoh and told, kill all the male children. And these two women, when they go to the women giving birth, they refuse. They don't. They go back to Pharaoh and they tell him, these Jewish women are not like the Egyptian women. These Jewish women don't need the services of a midwife. By the time we get there, they've already given birth. We can't kill the children. We can't take them from them. So Pharaoh has said to the midwives, kill the children. And the midwives have defied Pharaoh. Midwives, all of you are Shifra and Puah. And I want to ask you, Shifra and Puah, two questions. The first question is, please, Shifra and Puah, when Pharaoh first tells you that you should kill the male children of the Israelite women, what do you think initially? Are you going to go along with him at any point? Are you frightened of him? Are you immediately absolutely convinced that you're not going to do it? What is your response, Shifra and Puah, when Pharaoh first tells you to kill the children? Aliza.
We will find a way to rise up against this autocrat.
So Aliza straight away tells us that Shifra and Puah, her Shifra, her Puah, are immediately resistant. Jerry, you wanted to respond. You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, I agree with Aliza. I can't even bear the thought of it. So I just think feeling so trapped is not an option, and have to be creative and find another way forward. It's impossible. It's impossible to think. Yeah.
Impossible. Janet.
I am adamant that I will defy the order because I'm a midwife and I bring life into this earth. I do not take it away.
Thank you so much. Is there a midwife here? Is there a Shifra or Puah who for one moment thought that they might have to do what Pharaoh has commanded? Do we have that voice? No, we don't. Melinda.
I'm really scared. I mean, I'm absolutely committed to giving life and surviving life, but I don't really know what to do now. I really need to go and talk to my sisters, because without their support, I don't know what I would do. I'd run away. I wouldn't do it, but I also don't know whether I would be able to defy it.
The thought that you might have to run away, very real, very realistic in this situation. Can I just ask you, midwives, does God play a role in your decision? Any of you? Shashi?
I think for me, a lot of it is about protecting women, you know, and this idea of God or the goddess, or however we want to phrase it, is wrapped up in the protecting of women. Children are lost. You know, childbirth is a dangerous game at the best of times, but the lives of the women are really the central point, I think.
So again, here, it's women protecting women. And I want to remind you, of course, that Pharaoh has chosen you as women to be the agents of his awful plan, and to be the women, of course, as the chief victims of his awful plan. However bad the slavery was, and Janet explained to us how she worked from morning to night, and there wasn't enough food, and everybody's oppressed. However bad the slavery is, nothing compares to this decree that your child that you've carried for 9 months should be killed. Nothing compares to it. And so Shoshi's just articulated that the women are both the most oppressed, and the women are also the most resistant, those who stand up against the decree. Is there another voice of a woman, of Shifra or Puah, for whom God played a role in their thinking and decision making? Because you know, Shiframpur, I could have asked whether you're Jewish or not. It's not even clear whether you're Jewish or not. There's a question whether Pharaoh would think of asking a Jewish woman to kill the Jewish babies. Perhaps he thought that his Egyptian midwives might do it. Anyway, that's a debate amongst the commentators. We are running out of time, and one of the questions is whether we as women pray or don't pray. Some of you have articulated that you do, and some of you have articulated that you actually definitely don't. That's your turning in is not that way, but amongst the children of Israel, we would perhaps pray. I want to take you to 2 more steps, if Melinda's allowing me the time. Melinda? The first one is the experience of the plagues. And I want to take you to this, because this fellow Moses, we had much more time, we'd explore what it meant when this fellow Moses, who's been away for 40 years, suddenly reappears in front of you and challenges Pharaoh and what your feelings are towards this man Moses. How do you feel now that he's around? Do you trust him? Do you believe in him? Are you convinced by him, or are you resisting him? But now we've moved on and we've had 8 plagues. The 9th plague of darkness, which we are told affected the Egyptian households, but may not have affected the Jewish households quite in the same way. And perhaps we'll explore together for 1 minute. What did you experience, ladies, women of Israel, with the plague of darkness? What has happened to you through the preceding 8 plagues? What are you feeling now during the time of the plague of darkness? And perhaps you'll share with me what it was like in your house. Did you have some darkness? No darkness? Did you see the darkness of your neighbors? What did darkness mean to you? Share with me what you're feeling now after 8 plagues. We're in the 9th plague of darkness. What's going on for you? You're still not free. You're still not out of Egypt. What's going on after 8 plagues and in the plague of darkness?
During the plague of darkness, our family was very silent. There was, it was a time of contemplation, of thinking, of what is happening to us.
Was it dark in your home?
It was black. I couldn't see anything, like a blind person, completely black.
Completely black. And it was very silent. It must have been terrifying. Yeah. Were you terrified?
No,
silent?
It wasn't
was
terrifying.
Was it terror?
It made us think and contemplate.
Very interesting. Not terrifying, thinking and contemplating. Thank you. Anyone have a different experience or the same experience? Are you still hopeful? This is the 9th plague. Eliza, share with us.
It was a time of the unknown for us, where we couldn't see where we were going forward, but we could remember where we were before. But there was no vision, literally or metaphorically, at that stage.
Ah, you see, after 9, this is now the 9th plague. And the blindness Eliza's describing to us is a blindness where you also can't see forward, because maybe you saw forward after the first plague. But you can't even see forward because maybe you've given up hope. Any other experiences of the plague of darkness. I'll share with you that Shlomo Carlebach said something very beautiful about his experience as a slave in Egypt during the plague of darkness. And Shlomo Carlebach said that there was complete darkness in the Jewish homes, physical darkness in the Jewish homes as there was in the Egyptian homes. The physical darkness was exactly the same, but in the Jewish homes, we embraced each other. We put out our hands to help each other. And so there was light. Whereas in the Egyptian homes, after 8 previous plagues and this impending sense of doom, people were only with themselves and not helping each other, not embracing each other, not putting out their hands to help each other. So for them, the darkness was terrifying. For us, the darkness was a sort of embracing blanket. So that's one way we might have experienced the plague of darkness. And finally, just because you know that you at your Seder can take anyone on any journey back into the story. And when the Seder, we're told we should see ourselves as if we were slaves in Egypt, we should be trying to live in our minds those moments. So one more moment, which has been alluded to when we were talking about Miriam. And I want to, just before we had this incredible song of singing after we crossed the Red Sea, our Seder narrative also takes us to the edge of the Red Sea, where the Egyptians are behind us and the sea is in front of us. And we have to make a decision. And I'd like to ask every woman here, when you are at the edge of the Red Sea, with the Egyptians behind you and the sea in front of you, are you a woman who puts her foot forward towards the sea? Do you encourage your family to do so? Or are you a woman who wants to return or surrender to the Egyptians? Who are you at that moment? The Egyptian army behind you, maybe there are other positions, and the sea in front of you. Who are you, women of Israel, at that moment? And I'd be very grateful if each of you would share maybe just one word or one thought, what you're feeling at the moment, or what you would do at that moment. Just each share a word. Maybe I'll call on you if you don't mind and ask you to give a response. Melinda, do you mind going first? What's going on with you at that moment?
I'm confused, but I think I have to go forward.
Thank you. Vivian.
Yes, definitely go forward, and with courage and conviction. And if we sing and dance, we'll take everyone with us, and we will have water.
Ala.
We have to take the opportunity to move forward.
All the women so far are moving forward. Maxine, you too?
There's no going back. We can only go forward, and we better go forward in the best way we possibly, and the strength and the vigor and faith. I think the biggest thing is having faith, that if we've been led there, that's where we need to go.
Carol? Carol, you're muted.
I agree with Maxine. We must move forward. You can never go back. And we have to give ourselves a chance, because there's no chance of being a slave.
Kalantha?
Definitely move forward.
Shashi?
I think you're all mad. I am just running from. I don't know if I'm going forwards or backwards.
Thank you. Dahlia? Dahlia? You're muted.
Definitely go forward.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Shoshi, these women are abandoning you. They're going forward.
I think I'll end up being dragged along. I think it's just that the fear of where I was and angry men coming at me is much bigger than any other thought, I think.
Janet?
I'm not scared. I'm going forward.
Thank you. Dvora? Deborah?
I'm going to say a positive change, and I'm going to go with the flow and go forward. I'm sorry, Shoshana, you've been left behind.
Ruth? Ruth, you're muted.
Yeah, I'd say to my kids, let's go for a nice long swim. Get out.
But it's interesting. Ruth is saying to the kids, giving the kids the encouragement that they might need, because maybe you've got screaming, frightened children with you. And she said, come on, we'll go for a swim.
Ruth must be in the middle of the desert. It must be hot where she is to think of swimming, because I'm sitting in London where it's way too cold to contemplate swimming.
Well, I was a Bondi girl, so that's what I thought of.
Yeah, go take the kids. But I think that what's really important of Ruth, what Ruth just added, is the need of the mothers or grandmothers to encourage the children. Bernice, you're muted. You're muted. Bernice, you're muted. Not hearing you. Bernice, we're not hearing you.
Bernice, unmute yourself.
Oh,
yes.
Now.
Is that all right?
Yes, please.
It was my device was playing up. There's an old Spanish saying that the situation is hopeless, therefore we must go forward.
Very interesting. I wonder where they got that from. Perhaps Nachshon and we women. Eliza.
I would rather risk drowning in the sea than drowning in slavery. And I'm going to grab Shoshana and put her on my shoulders, whether she likes it or not. I'm going to grab all those women and we're going to hold each other up through that sea.
Thank you. How wonderful and feminist. Emily.
Yeah, I'm going to join everyone and move forward with conviction and faith.
Dee. Dee Hart, are you there?
Hi.
Hi.
I would gather my family around me, hold hands and wade in and hope we can float.
Thank you. I don't know whether Lauren D is able to respond. No. Danielle. No,
I must admit I'm a scaredy cat, so I'm turning around to what I know. So yeah.
And as we know, we have Eliza who's pulling you with her, taking you forward. Miriam? Renee?
I'd go forward in trust.
In trust. And who are you trusting, Renee?
Really, I guess the feeling of God, but also just a sense of flying with the community. Let's just go together.
Flying with the community, going forward together. I think that this is, I don't know whether there's anyone else who, because with the people don't have the cameras on, it's hard to know whether they're with us. But I think this, Renee's last comment was a very beautiful and poignant one. We move forward. Renee, do you want to repeat it?
Oh, if I can remember exactly, it was just a trust in God, but a sense of flying with wings with the community. Just go together. We're in this together now. We're going. We have not only that there's no choice, but just a conviction that that's the right thing in trust.
Thank you. Miriam, did you? Yes.
I think going forward with an intuitive mind or mind's eye. As others have said, you can't go backward, and life is about moving forward.
And this moment where we're standing at the edge of the Red Sea is a pivotal moment. When you read your Haggadah, we're told that this is a moment of up to 250 miracles by the divine. It was a huge divine intervention in nature. But as you wonderful women of Israel have just articulated to me, it was also a huge moment of human trust, of woman to woman moving forward together. We had to have faith in the miracles of the divine, but as Renee articulated so beautifully, we also had to fly together as a community. We women provided the strength and support for one another, and we know it because when we got to the other side, Miriam remarkably produced a tambourine. She'd taken a tambourine out of Egypt because she knew that it was a moment, there was going to be a moment where we wanted to celebrate together. And I know if I'd asked you other women, there would have been others of you who'd also brought tambourines, because we as women knew there was a moment to celebrate. And guess what? The men hadn't brought any musical instruments. It was just the women. Belinda, back to you.
Peter, thank you so very, very much. We've all had an amazing experience of coming out of Egypt tonight. It's past the time we were meant to finish, and we have so much more that needs to go on in a Seder. What I'm just going to do very quickly is tell you what's in the materials so you can go through them yourself, because we clearly cannot do that now. We're all much too tired. And I mean, you know, going through 200 years of slavery and having to come out of it is quite an achievement, you know. But very often people talk about the 10 plagues, and they talk about the plagues as, oh, let's think about the modern day plagues. Oh, there's a plague of apathy, that no one does anything, and there's a plague of indifference and whatever else. But I'd like to say that from a women's perspective, we should see these plagues differently. We should see these plagues as the way in which God has responded to oppression, and as a model that we could take on to say, when there is oppression, we have to come up with lots of different strategies to deal with it, because they're not going to get us go with one thing. Frogs aren't nothing, nor a lice, and nor are beasts, and nor is darkness. We need to use lots of different strategies. And in the materials that you've got in our Haggadah, we've got material there, and Allah was going to tell us her family story of coming out, a personal story. I hope you'll share one at your Seder. Then we're going to talk about the problem of modern day slavery, because slavery is a very real issue for Indigenous people in Australia, for other people in Australia today, for women around the world and women in Australia, as well as some men, of course. And this is, of course, not the only oppression that we face. What I'd like you to do is to make sure that you know about the slavery and what's going on in the world. But then there's a very important document that I've included here that I was really going to take time out to discuss, which is a piece that Shoshi actually put together in conversation. And we were talking about, it's our responsibility to do something. We can't wait for God to solve all the problems. And therefore, it's before God acts, man has to act. And if you wait for God, you might miss out on the cues that God was sending you in the first place. So think about different forms of social activism. What action can you take to deal with the problem? Yes, if enough of us want to change things, we can bring each other along with each other. We can come together. We have, like Renee says, we can fly. Like Eliza says, we can carry each other on our backs. Like all of the women here tonight said, as women working together, what amazing things we can do. We can take our people out of Egypt. We can make sure that we merit the new world. It's said that it was for the sake of the women that God brought the people of Israel out of Egypt, for the sake of the women, for the righteous behavior of the women, whatever that means. I think the most righteous thing that you can do is think about how to protect each other and how to protect other people in the community and bring them forward. And so I'm going to skip through to the very, very end of the Seder. And I'm so sorry you're not going to hear some of these other parts, but please spend the time reading the material we've put together. I was going to ask and do what Peter did, which was go around and ask everyone for their takeaway from tonight. But I'm worried that we don't, we've all now contributed our thoughts about that last moment. And this, of course, is what it's about standing in Egypt and coming out of Egypt. So instead, I'm going to go to a little poem or a short poem that we have at the end. And I'm going to ask Eliza. It's the poem that we're talking about is on page 34 of the Haggadah, if you can find it. Eliza, are you able to? I can't see Eliza anymore. Can we view everyone back on gallery, please? Okay. Eliza, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, okay. Eliza, have you got the
Hi.
poem?
Yes. Would you like me to read it, or would you like everyone to read it together?
Well, whichever you like. You're in charge.
I'll read. Poem by Pastor Martin Nimol. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
I think we need to have that pause. We need to think. There was no one left to come for me. So selfishly, we have to act, because if we don't act, it's against our own interest. We have to act because it's the right thing to do, but we have to act because it's against our own interest. And that takes us, if everybody can now turn to page 34 of their Haggadah, we're going to do a very Women's Seder activity. Let me know when you're at page 34. Can I have some thumbs up of page 34?
And I'll apologize for the messy page numbers. I'm sorry I didn't get those coordinated.
What I'm going to ask everybody to do is to turn themselves off mute. And we are going to attempt to do the Women's Seder business. So turn yourself off mute, and we're going to try and read this poem together to see if we can end. At least it's not singing where we've got no hope at all. And let's see if we can read this poem together as our final words, so we can celebrate together. As it's called, we celebrate together. Okay, are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
We celebrate together,
rejoice in what we've become,
and unite the female spirit.
We are many, yet
we are one. We celebrate together. We continue what we've begun.
Holding
hands with one another. We are many, yet we are one. As we praise God for our deliverance from Egypt
in days
of yore,
we raise our cups and voices high.
Remember what this night is for. We celebrate together,
rejoice in what we've become,
and unite
the female spirit.
We are many, yet we are one. Just as Miriam
stood by the water's edge and danced
with timbrel in hand, we'll take time to bask in our freedom, pray for peace in every land.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech
Sheheyanu v'kiyamanu
holding hands with one another. We are many, yet we are one. As we praise God for our deliverance from Egypt, what this night is for.
Self everywhere. Baruch Adonai, Hen Melech Haolam,
We are many, yet we are one. We are many, yet we are one. Not really working. It was an idea that I won't repeat. It was worth a try. Well, I think that we have imagined that we've held hands round the circle in the room, that we're all in the room together, holding hands, celebrating. Deborah, unmute.
Can I take 30 seconds to mention one thing? I'm very new at this, but I just... So this friend of mine gave me this book. It's called Pesach. It's called Passover Recipes, and it's from South Africa. And there's a lot of South African women around. And I just wanted to show, I'm not too sure if it's a very feminist photo or not, but I don't want to insult any women. But I just want to show you this picture. It's so the author is called Esther Surdat, and it's this woman preparing knedlach for Pesach. And I as a feminist find this actually very invigorating. Can I just show everyone? But I don't want anyone to get insulted.
No, go for it.
Go for it. So this is it. It's
women are.
Passover recipe and guidebook. It's new, and it's got this. Can you see? Can you actually see? I'll move it back a bit.
It's fabulous.
Yes. Can you bring it forward?
Bring it forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it say?
It says, preparing knedlach for Pesach, Alphonse Levi, 19th century drawing. And I just think it's just so, does it come under the category of feminist? It's a South African book, so I'm not too sure about that. But I just think there's just so much meaning in this picture. And she's so happy, and she's rolling those knedlach, and she feels proud. And obviously the whole family's coming over, and I'm sure they're nice and fluffy.
Well, that's a big lot of knedlach to eat yourself if it's just for you.
Thank you. I just want to share that with you because it made me happy.
I think it's important to recognise that a lot of what we do as women does involve cooking, feeding others, bringing joy to others, caring for others. These are all parts of who we are. We're not going to stop being the people we are and go in the streets waving flags instead. You know, what we have to do is work out how all of our identity is brought into our being. And
I think that says a lot. It says a lot.
And so I'd just like to thank everybody for being here and for bearing with a few people did drop off, and that you've got a lot more reading and food for thought. Think about social activism, thinking about yourself as a Jew, think about yourself as a woman, and how that will make a difference if you allow that part of you, the female part of you, the woman's part of you, to have an active role in whatever's going on. And I think that Peter's taught us a lot tonight about remembering where we're positioned in the story, because we are in that story everywhere. And at that note, I'm going to let all these people who are so tired and who've been amazing to stay the distance so far. So thank you all very, very much, and have a wonderful and kosher Pesach. Thank you everyone who participated, and those people who didn't, I'm so sorry that you didn't get a chance to do your part. Good night, everyone.
And thank you, Melinda.
Thank you.
Good night.
You.
Wonderful.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everyone.
Thank you so much for organising.